Happy June and happy Pride Month. The biggest transit of June is on June 9th, Jupiter's ingress into the sign of Cancer. Jupiter transits a sign every year. And this year, Jupiter is exalted on its throne in the sign of Cancer. And I've been telling all of my clients all year that this is the transit to rejoice in. However, there is a caveat because in the month of June, we are going to experience another Saturn Jupiter square. And then as the square releases its tension or separates, then we will really understand what Jupiter is trying to grow and expand in our Cancer whole sign house. But before I begin, my name is Laurachung. I am a Western tropical astrologer, and mine and Stephanie Campos's monthly astrology forecast for the month of June is live right now. So if you want to have an overview of the month of June, you can go watch that now. But this is the astrology forecast for the week of June 2nd to June 8th. I just wanted to give you a little heads up of where we're moving towards because the very next day after this specific forecast ends on June 8th, Jupiter will move into the sign of Cancer. And I find it so interesting because I posted the clip to my TikTok and someone commented, why can't you just say the positive things about a transit or the astrology? And I just want to be very upfront and blunt about my style of astrology and the way that I work is I'm not just going to tell you something that you want to hear. This is not pop astrology. This is not sun sign astrology. This is using the astrology and understanding the energy that is available and leaning into the energy so that you can transform and change your life and really understand the archetypes at play here. So I'm not going to just say that Jupiter in Cancer is going to be positive for everybody because that would just be a straight out lie. I believe that overall, this is going to be the best and most fortunate transit for most people, but it really depends on what life cycle you're in. Is Jupiter your time lord? Is Jupiter your chart ruler? Are you in a moment of your life where you're going through maybe a Pluto square or a Neptune square or a Saturn square, or you're going through your Saturn return? Like there's so many different scenarios that are at play that I just can't say this huge, general term that says that it's going to be positive for everybody. So I like to give you all of the information so that you can discern how this applies to you. Also, I just want to mention that Stephanie and I try to do a good job of, if I might say so myself, of separating what can be applied to your own individual transit natally as it affects your natal placements and also the mundane transits. And because one cannot go without the other, because we are affected by the collective energies. This is why we try to mention both. How Jupiter in Cancer, how that transit can manifest in sometimes not so pleasant ways, especially if you are a US citizen, since the US Sibley chart has a stellium of planets in Cancer, and how that's expressing are the shadow aspects of Cancer. So Jupiter transiting through all of the USA's Cancer placements can just amplify and expand the shadow parts of Cancer. And how that looks like is nationalism and make America great again and racism and defending homelands, as is the case of Is Not Real. So I just want to say that take what we say with a grain of salt, apply it to your own natal chart and the timing of your own life, and also at the mundane level. So I just wanted to give that disclaimer as always. And also, I wanted to mention that my approach to astrology is from a decolonial lens. I try to apply the techniques of traditional astrology, the Hellenistic astrology that I studied. I tried to apply the foundation of the mathematics behind it with a 2025 decolonial perspective, and an anti-racist, I guess I don't want to just keep saying like anti, but more of a conscious level. So oftentimes you will hear me refer to a planet as non-binary because I believe the planets are non-binary. I don't think they're gendered, like my own personal opinion. And I am trying to really reimagine the planets that, I've learned in Hellenistic astrology, Greek and Roman mythology, because that is the Roman Greco period of astrology, but also apply my knowledge of indigenous and my own indigenous spiritual mythologies and cosmologies, as well as reimagining some of these planets and archetypes. I just did an episode with Camille Michelle Gray on Neptune. It's titled Neptune Reimagined because I had an experience with a white man astrologer who was just saying negative things about my Neptune placement, and I internalized that for a really long time until I started studying it on my own. And I was telling my sister, I think that's why I got into astrology, because I wanted to see how astrologers were coming up with these conclusions and giving me these readings. So I wanted to see for myself and investigate for myself, where in the chart does it say this? And as I started really learning, astrology is really up to the interpretation of the astrologer, their own worldview, their own filter. So I would just also advise you to like look to the astrologer that you're listening to. Do they have aligned values with you? Do they have a praxis of decolonial work? And like, do they talk about politics? Because a lot of the astrologers that I've seen, besides a few, talk about what's really going on today. And I feel, as astrology is the study of time and cycles, as correlated to historical events that happen on earth, it is not, it is just like not ethical to not talk about things and like that are happening right now that are literally oppressing marginalized people and people of the global majority. And so that's the kind of astrology I practice. If this is not in alignment with you, and if you have a white body, and when I say white people and that offends you, maybe you can look to another astrologer. I just want to say that too, because we are talking about a system that oppresses all of us in different ways at different intersections, of course. But my ultimate goal to use astrology is for collective liberation and allowing ourselves to show up in our authentic self. Angela Davis says radical means root. And I love astrology because it allows us to fully understand ourselves at the essence of who we are, our soul's expression. And yeah, I think it's such a beautiful gift. And this is why I am so passionate about it. And so, with that being said, I'm going to start with a short recap. On May 28th, so this is the recap from the following week, Elon Musk steps down from the government role after criticizing Trump's big, beautiful bill. Now, Stephanie Campos predicted that the girlies would be breaking up during our February forecast. So for February, we actually did this in January. And so she saw that Elon has Mars at 20 degrees of Aquarius, and Trump has his natal Mars at like 24, 26 degrees of Leo. And so they're opposite each other. So by transits, there was a full moon in Leo at that time. And she predicted that at some point they would break up. And so on May 28th, he officially steps down and they announced that he's going to step down from his government role. Now, of course, like before he steps down, I'm sure they had some discussions about not seeing eye to eye on things. And since then, Elon Musk's net worth, like I just watched this Sunday morning news this morning that his stocks went down. I don't know how many points, but his net worth went down by like, I want to say 100 billion, but that just doesn't even seem right. Like, how can somebody be worth that much, you know? So I think Trump's tariffs, his all of the things that he's been passing, these bills are actually hurting Elon's business. Of course, he did the salute, which is obviously synonymous with the schmatzis in Germany. So him just, I guess, being himself really did not bode well for Trump's image as well. And they do have interesting synastry. There is something there about kinship, right? They have Cancer placements that are really cute together. But ultimately, Stephanie's prediction was right. Now, this was a couple of days before the Mercury Cazimi. And I mentioned in last week's astrology forecast that before Mercury goes in Cazimi, which in Arabic means in the heart of the sun, Mercury is being burned up in the beams. And my experience with this is that news stories come up that reveal they have like a revealing nature of some kind of corruption or something that maybe didn't want to come out. And there was news stories of Elon's heavy drug usage. I mean, you could tell by the video footage of him at the inauguration and just like him tripping on ketamine. In my own personal experience, what I witnessed last week was just a lot of people calling each other out, like infighting amongst the spiritual girlies, I mean, I also got caught in the crosshairs, just like back and forth confusion of who's telling the truth, who's not, who is not taking accountability. And that's a very mercurial thing also in the sign of Gemini, which is a mutable air sign. And because it's a double body sign, and because the archetype of Gemini is the twins, there's always two sides to a story. On June 30th, the Gaza Freedom Flotilla announced that they will sail to Gaza to break the blockade, the siege, and they will set sail on June 1st. Now, I thought this was so interesting based on the astrology. And I actually wanted to show the chart for this one because a lot of people are also curious about Is Not Real's natal chart. So I thought this would be a great time. And I'm going to show Is Not Real. It's Gemini season, so you can't like say things. You have to be careful for what you say because there's spells, right? So the fact that is not real, we're going to keep calling it that. So is not real is a May 14th Taurus sun. 1948. So the very next day was the Nakba or the catastrophe. And this is a 4 p.m. chart in Tel Aviv is not real. So as you can see here, I like to orient my clients towards the rising sign first because the glyph for the ascendant, also synonymous with rising, is on the eastern horizon. The constellation of Libra was rising like a sunrise. And so when our souls take when our bodies take its first breath, we decide that we want to come into this physical form as this specific archetype. And so is not real has a Libra rising at 23 degrees. Now, remember that the Al Aqsa flood happened on October 7th. This was a week before the October 14th, 2023 solar eclipse in the sign of Libra at 22 degrees, I believe. So it was a South Node eclipse. A South Node is about releasing. And so on Is Not Real's ascendant, this was the releasing of their identity for the whole world to see and awaken to the reality, the truth of the identity of what is not real really is, which is a settler colonizer, an occupier, etc., etc. And here we have the 23-degree Taurus sun is not real. This nakba, this separation, right? This separation. What did I say? Separation? Because I'm thinking of in 1948, there was a solar eclipse in Taurus, and in this solar eclipse, Korea also was separated in two along the 13th parallel, which then separated North Korea and South Korea. That's why I said separated, because it was this solar eclipse that really changed. I feel like it was like some kind of crack in the universe, because 1948 was also when the South African apartheid began as well. So there's something about the division, right? And the US and European imperialist trying to break apart, divide and conquer Asia and Africa and other places of the world, of course. But the Nakba, the catastrophe, was Israel's Independence Day. I say that in air quotes. And then they expelled like 700,000 Palestinians from the land, and they started the ethnic cleansing in 1948. That's why I think it's so interesting when people keep harping on October 7th, but this has been an ethnic cleansing since 1948. So it's been 77 years. Anyway, and here we have a Leo moon and a stellium of planets of Leo. So we have Pluto, Saturn, and Mars in the sign of Leo in the 11th whole sign house. And Leo's shadow aspect, of course, is like, look at me. What about me? Pay attention to me. The 10th whole sign house is Cancer, the right to defend itself, its homeland. And we can go on and on and on and on. What I wanted to bring your attention to, however, is on May 31st, 2010, there was another Gaza Freedom Flotilla. Bet you didn't know that. At 4:30 a.m. in the Mediterranean Sea, I couldn't find an exact location, but a bunch of activists from Turkey were on board. So I just used Turkey as the location. So this was also Gemini season at 9 degrees, which we'll get back to why that's important. We have here Mars at 26 degrees. Okay. Remember that Is Not Real has a Mars in Leo. So let's put the charts together. Remember, this is the Gaza Freedom Flotilla, May 30th, 2010. So this was Is Not Real's Mars return. And basically 10 passengers on the flotilla were killed and 30 were injured. So they were trying to bring humanitarian aid to the Gaza Strip because of the blockade in 2010. It really is sad that nothing has changed in all these years, but we won't go there. This was after their Venus return. Okay. Venus is the planet of love and beauty. But of course, there's a shadow side to every sign. So for is not real, just like the United States, Cancer for them is defending their homeland, that they have the right to be there, or homeland. I do think it's interesting that at the time, transit wise, the moon was in Capricorn, which is the ruler of the 10th, because the moon is the ruler of Cancer. There was the North Node in Capricorn and Pluto in Capricorn. So the focus on the homeland and like whose home are you defending? And Uranus was at 0 degrees of Aries. So Uranus just ingressed in the sign of Aries, which is not real's seventh whole sign house of one-on-one partnerships and open enemies. Now, on May 2nd, that was the Gaza Freedom Flotilla 2.0. And that happened in Malta. If you remember last month, there was a Gaza Freedom Flotilla called the Conscience. And through a drone, Israel attacked this Gaza Freedom Flotilla full of activists trying to go break the siege, break the blockade. Now, that is a signature of Mars. Mars tries to break through and sever. And a blockade, I was trying to look for significations of this. A blockade is Saturn. It could be Saturn, right? And Mars breaking through something that is like stagnant, which for me is such a Taurus. I'm sorry to the Taurus. Don't get mad at me. Because Taurus is like, I'm standing still. I'm not moving anything. And the fact that it's a blockade, there has not been food, water, aid, medicine, supplies that has been able to get into Gaza for 90 days now. It's just ludicrous. Anyway, so now on May 2nd, 2025, that was like about a month ago, there was that drone that dropped, right? We all saw that. Now look, Mars again is in the sign of Leo, like the first time, and it's on is not real's moon, the right to defend itself, right? Because the moon is this very sensitive point in the natal chart. The moon also talks about home. The moon rules is not real's 10th house of like, the public, what they're known for, which I'm sorry, like, I'm not sorry. The right to defend itself, even the IDF, it's like, what are you defending yourself from? You have billions and billions and billions of dollars in US aid. It's just US aid, and I mean like weapons and money. On a side note, US Americans don't have universal health care, free education. Guess what? Israeli citizens have both on our dime. If that does not make you angry, I don't know what to tell you. I've said this on multiple TikTok reels that is not real sun being in Taurus in the 8th house with the North Node there. They literally cannot exist without our money, because all they do is like, they don't actually make anything. They export diamonds, but they steal the diamonds from the Congo. Like, they don't actually, because colonizers don't create anything. They just steal stuff. So what I'm saying is, like, without our tax dollars, if we withheld them, they would not be able to exist, because literally it's a settler colony of the United States. Anyway, I'm digressing. Another similar activation from the first chart is Neptune, Venus, in Aries. It's a very sensitive point, the world point. Remember, I said in many, many different monthly forecasts, I always say the cardinal signs at 0 degrees is a world point. Something at a world level, some news happens. And so Venus ingress into the sign of Aries, and Neptune is there. Neptune rules the seas. So this was a Gaza Freedom Flotilla in Malta, by the way. Malta is in Europe. What is not real doing bombing a ship in Malta? Doesn't make any sense. Okay. And there was a Cancer moon. So now to this moment, like I mentioned, I want to get the right chart. Gaza Freedom Flotilla 3.0. I saw that they had like on the Gaza Freedom Flotilla Instagram, I saw that they had like Friday, Saturday, Sunday, they had like events. And so I took this time on May 30th, 2025 at 7 p.m. is when they started the like events in Catania, Italy, which is in Sicily. So I don't know if they technically started sailing on this day. I don't think so. I think they are sailing on June 1st. But this is when they announced to the world that they were going to be sailing again. And looky here, Saturn at 0 degrees of Aries conjunct Neptune. Saturn in Aries is vigilante justice. You want a fallen Saturn because Saturn, when it's in its domicile, I've said this so many times now in every forecast, it upholds tradition, hierarchy, the status quo. So you want Saturn in Aries in its fall essentially to break down barriers, to remove, to like break through a blockade. Neptune is again the god and goddess of the sea. This is again a flotilla. Neptune also rules empathy, compassion, humanitarian aid, and a lot of actors like Greta Thunberg is not an actress, but she is a well-known climate activist. I think an actor from Game of Thrones is on this boat. So having actors and famous people on the boat, Neptune, is also giving this flotilla some press. And you want to have famous people, unfortunately, because our culture is obsessed with celebrity, to be on this boat to be protected essentially, unfortunately. Now the moon is back in Cancer like it was in the May 2nd chart, and Mars is now conjunct Saturn in Leo, and it's going to again, is not real is going to go through its Mars return later in June. What else? Oh, so this was announced on May 30th, and that was the day, I believe, of the Cazimi. Mercury and the sun coming together at 9 degrees, right? Now, what I forgot to mention last week is that at 9 degrees of Gemini, there is a fixed royal star called Aldebaran. It's one of the Persian royal stars. And the four of them are, I believe, on Taurus, which is exactly opposite Aldebaran, Fomalhaut, and I believe Regulus. Fomalhaut is in Pisces, Regulus now is in Virgo. But Aldebaran is the watcher of the, is it the watcher of the East or the watcher of the West? And this placement of Aldebaran is said to be like, when people have their sun conjunct Aldebaran, this can bring fame of some kind of like, because in ancient Persia, a lot of the fixed stars talk about like military presences. And if you notice here, I'm sorry, astrology is just like so literal. There was a Kazemi, right, on May the 30th, and Mercury essentially is not real, had its Mercury return, and there it's not real as natal Mercury is conjunct Aldebaran, and the Kazemi was happening that day when the Freedom Flotilla 3.0 announced that they're going to do it. And I thought that this was so like I personally believe this time it's going to work. I'm sending so much protection to them because it just seems like I don't know, I can't explain it. It just seems like they're being protected now, especially since this week as they are moving as they are sailing towards Gaza, there are really sweet transits happening. Now, like I mentioned in the beginning, when Jupiter ingresses into Cancer, that is going to square Saturn and Neptune in Aries. That could be a block of some kind, but we shall see how long the sailing trip takes, because before that happens, though, the astrology is really nice and really sweet and supportive. So we'll see what happens. Um, what I thought was so interesting about this Flotilla 3.0 chart is that the main character of this is the Saturn Neptune conjunction in Aries. And one of the activists, her name is Tan, they wrote on, or they said in their video, this takes revolutionary imagination. And because they had tried in May, they obviously were frustrated and also scared because their ship was bombed. And it just seems like calling reps, calling our politicians, peacefully protesting, boycotting, right? But there's still a blockade. And so 10 said, this is revolutionary imagination, being able to go on this flotilla to break the siege in Gaza. I thought that was so Saturn Neptune conjunction because 36 years ago, during the last Saturn Neptune conjunction in the sign of Capricorn, 1989 to 1990, with its co presence with Uranus, this was when the South African apartheid started to crumble. This is when the Berlin Wall came down. This is also when, and I always reference this, Yasser Arafat called for the independence of Palestine. And in Palestine's chart, there is a Saturn Neptune conjunction in Capricorn. And so it'll be interesting to see what this square means for the future of Palestine and its borders, because Saturn and Neptune is the dissolution of borders. It could also mean like bringing down the apartheid wall and ending the occupation, or at least the beginning of it, inshallah. So 10 then says, what will it take before we just do? And that's very Aries. Neptune is the imagination and the dream. Saturn in Aries is taking matters into your own hands, going against the status quo, going against what is expected of us. And Aries is direct actions. It's not waiting for permission, it's doing the damn thing. And so I just thought this whole thing was just interesting. And something that just came up in my mind as I was saying this is I know this is so left field, but that's just how my brain works. Is this just like yesterday, Taylor Swift was able to buy her masters, the rest of her masters, and Taylor Swift was born in 1989. She also has that triple conjunction in Capricorn. So we shall see what happens with this flotilla situation. And I also saw that the weekend of the Saturn Neptune square to Jupiter in Cancer, there is a march to Gaza as well from, I believe, Cairo to Rafah. There is a call to activists and volunteers to march to Gaza as an act of solidarity for the people there. Wow, that was a long recap, but I just felt like there has been a lot going on, and I wanted to relate this to the recent news. Obviously, I think those are the extreme circumstances for these transits, but I think this week, which is June 2nd to June 8th, will be much sweeter for your personal life, hopefully. On June 4th, Venus and Aries will sextile Jupiter in Gemini at 28 degrees. This is really sweet, the two benefics coming together in a sextile supportive position. Now, sextiles are 60-degree angles, and they are between two elements that support each other. So between air and fire and water and earth. You want air to grow and feed fire, you need earth to contain water. So it's oftentimes that these two elements will be in a sextile to each other. Aries, Venus in Aries is ending its transit finally after that long retrograde and coming to a supportive little touch, little nudge with Jupiter and Gemini, also at the end of Jupiter's journey in Gemini. And I think this is really sweet. This is a day to meet people, do some community actions. I went to, on May 29th, I went to Yoon So's court date. Yoon So Chung, she is a 21-year-old Columbia University student who has been hunted by ICE, essentially. And because she was a part of the Free Palestine protests back in, what was it, 2024, in the encampments there. And her court date was to extend her, what is it called? Restraining order against ICE so that she can continue finishing her junior year at Columbia. And the judge, oh my God, it's such an interesting thing to be in a courtroom and hearing like the laws and our rights. It was really like tickling my Libra placements because I was like, if I could go back to school, I would be a lawyer, but probably not the kind of lawyer that makes a lot of money, but works pro bono for like human rights essentially, because it was just so interesting. And I highly recommend that you go because anybody, like people from the public, can just go into the court and watch. And so that something like that, or being in a community organizing event. Yesterday, I went to go see Amanda Seales at the People's Forum here in New York City, and her show was like fantastic. It was so funny, inspirational, and educational. All of that energy is like Venus sextile Jupiter in Gemini to me. It's coming together with value-minded people, sharing ideas, communicating, like doing some kind of art or protesting. That's June 4th. On June 5th, Mercury in Gemini will sextile Mars and Leo at 23 degrees. Mercury is in its domicile in Gemini, so it's very well resourced. And this is a placement where you're really curious, you're asking a lot of questions, you're not taking anything at face value. The thing about Mercury and Geminis that I appreciate but also get annoyed about is that they don't really take sides. They are people that can hold multiple truths at once, and there are people that can understand people's point of view from their side. I'm not saying that Mercury and Gemini people are like Libra, like both sidesing in. I'm just saying that multiple things can be true at the same time. But that is a great placement for actually just like being curious about something. And this morning, I was pulling tarot cards for myself, which I do every morning as I journal. And I got just like kind of sad cards. And it's not the energy that I feel at all. And so I was just like asking myself, like, I was just like curious. I was like, where is this coming from? Is this something that I'm avoiding, like feeling, Aquarius moon problems? And the deeper and deeper I got, the more it revealed to me that there were things that happened like a year ago that I didn't want to feel. So I avoided it. So I just like kept going and, just tried to like move on, very Aquarius moon. I'm sorry. And like the message came through that I needed to really feel it, feel the grief and the loss, because it was something that I was like avoiding feeling. It was like accruing within my body. So, um, Mercury and Gemini, curious. Again, sextiles are between two elements that are supportive for each other. Mars and Leo is courageous, bravery, energy. Mars and Leo also has this tendency to try to defend itself against haters. It could be like a defensive thing when a Leo does not feel loved or validated. It's like um, a little defensive. But ultimately, this is a supportive day, June 5th, to say the thing that you want to say it bravely, say it out loud. It's never too late. The more people that speak up, the more safe we will all be. The more people that show up, the more safe we will all be. On June 6th, Venus will ingress into the sign of Taurus, which is so lovely. Venus is in its domicile in Taurus. So this is such a beautiful transit to go slow, and it's a time to be sensual because Venus and Taurus is about the senses. It's reminding me of the Empress card in tarot. It's about knowing your worth and your value, asking for your worth and your value. And Venus and Taurus to me is about like planting flowers, appreciating what's beautiful around you. Venus and Taurus also, I hope this means that the people in Gaza will get the food and resources that they need, hopefully. And the blockade is removed essentially. But Venus and Taurus is really lovely. The people that will be benefiting of this transit the most is if you are obviously ruled by Venus, which is Libra and Taurus, if you're in a Venus perfection year and Venus is your time lord, or if you I think the water and earth signs are really going to like this because the earth signs, Virgo, Capricorn, are going to have a trine, and the water signs will have their sextile, except for Scorpio, which will be in its opposition. On June 8th, Mercury in Gemini will conjunct Jupiter in Gemini at 29 degrees. This is the anaretic degree. Now, June 8th to June 9th is so interesting because we have Mercury in its domicile, conjunct Jupiter and Gemini. So they are both finishing up this Gemini transit. And so Jupiter is going to the very next day ingress into the sign of Cancer. So I think there's going to be some surprising news, something that you find out, something that's maybe fortuitous in nature because Jupiter is like, here's your gift. And I noticed that with every planet that leaves a sign, it's like, okay, this is the end. This is the end of the journey, and we're blessing your Gemini house. You made it. And the very next day, okay, so the very next day, Mercury and Jupiter will ingress. I'm sorry, Mercury will conjunct Jupiter on June 8th, and then later on in the day, it will ingress into Cancer. And then the very next day, June 9th, Jupiter will ingress into the sign of Cancer. And so both of them being in at the anaretic degree of Gemini, and then moving to Cancer, the world point, again, a cardinal sign, June 8th to June 9th, there could be some news that comes out, something that I think is going to be at the individual level, like in your own personal life, I think it's going to be sweet. I think mundane wise, like I said, so much of the shadow aspect of Cancer is coming out. And so, even though I want to say like Jupiter in Cancer, when it moves into, like a cardinal world point, it's like blessings to everybody. I don't know. Like, I think that the US, especially, is exhibiting some of the terrible sides of Cancer. Now, I'm hoping that Jupiter, because again, it's exalted in Cancer, it is the greater benefic. That means that maybe people are coming together more, we're protecting each other. And it's more about like, even though Jupiter is like in a country's chart, the people is like the moon, and Jupiter is more like the guru or the teacher, even like the father archetype. No, the father is like Saturn, but I don't know. I'm hoping that in your personal life, this is like good news. Something is trying to manifest itself into your life, and you get the clarity that you need after they move into Cancer. Again, at the mundane level, I don't know how this is going to manifest. And of course, Jupiter will then start to form its square to Saturn and Neptune in the sign of Aries. But we will talk more about Jupiter in Cancer next week because this forecast is only going until June 8th. And yeah, I just really wish that I just pray that more and more people awaken, but not only awaken because that you can't just stop there, but have the courage, all this Aries energy, have the courage to do something about it. And if you're one of those people that ask, like, what should I do? That's really an Aries thing. Aries always looks to itself. The power comes from within. It's really knowing thyself in order for you to know what your role is and then do it. Find your people and work together. So I'm sending you so much love and protection, and I will see you next week. Bye.